Welcome to the Sales Leader Roundtable, a show where we explore, share, and learn about trends in leadership and sales acumen. A place that provides our audience valuable insights, advice, and best practices from trusted members of the sales leadership community. Now, let's welcome Kendley, Davenport, and Jim Diebold to this episode of the Sales Leader Roundtable.
Happy August to you, Jim. Happy August.
Hey, Kendley, happy August to you as well. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, and welcome to all of our audience to the August version of the Sales Leader Roundtable TV and radio broadcast. You know, I always shout out Dr. Jacqueline and USA Global TV and Radio for entrusting us with this time slot. We're so appreciative of her and her whole organization, and I always like to tell our audience that there's so much great content on USA Global TV, so make sure you check out all the different programs for which you can really gain and professionally grow in lots of different ways. But now, let me take a minute, Jim, and remind everybody what the Sales Leader Roundtable TV show is all about. You know, it's in our show, we explore topics in leadership and sales acumen from some of the leading thought leaders in our space. Our goal is to bring our audience actionable and practical information that allows you to immediately grow your teams and or your leadership skill set. That's what we're all about. And as indicated, I am Kendley Davenport, one of your co-hosts, along with Jim Diebold. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Kendley. Love it. Always exciting to be here and the amazing content that we have. And I'm super stoked about who we have today because it's the third time that I'm going to be able to take notes. I already have 2 full pages of notes from the first 2 times, so I'm really excited.
Well, I am too, Jim. Our topic, you know, what is it that makes frontline leadership management so challenging? And but we both know, being in this field for many years, that great leaders have to have great work-life balance. And that's sort of why we skipped the month of July ourselves. We wanted to recharge our own selves and make sure we're there for our leadership teams and for our people that we support, and making sure that we're recharged. And we took that time out. And I'm so thankful that we're able to get this topic going here in the month of August.
Yeah, fully agree. You know, there's an analogy I was given a long time ago, and that is a drowning person can't help another drowning person.
That's exactly right. Well, Jim, why don't you take a minute and introduce our guest that's coming up, and so we can get right into the topic.
Love to. Thank you. So today, folks, I get to introduce to you David Masover, who's an author and speaker and thought leader in the B2B sales space. For over 30 years, he has worked in large and small sales organizations in positions from sales rep to executive, and now as a consultant, of all of which has allowed him to refine the innovative and effective B2B sales and sales management techniques and strategies that he teaches today. David was one of the co-founders of Branders.com, which has since been acquired by Bell USA, the world's first and at one time largest online platform for customized promotional products. David now works as a private practice sales consultant, and we'll give you his contact information here in just a little bit.
Excellent.
Hey, David.
Welcome to the show,
hey guys.
David.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
We really appreciate you being up at this hour, because we know you're not here in the U.S. You're over in Europe. Actually, if I got it correct, in Budapest. Am I right?
Yeah, it's a little past my bedtime, but you know, I'm happy to be here, so I'll take one for the team.
Hey, we appreciate it a lot, and we're particularly excited about this topic that we've been talking about. But before we jump into that topic, I just wanted to sort of tee up something you've already did for our Sales Leader Roundtable cohort sessions that we did, when you talked about if you could only have one KPI, what would it be? And we had a lot of great feedback. We had a good attendance with a lot of, banter about, the outcome of that discussion. And I think it got a lot of people really thinking about stuff. And I know I'm working with a client that we just dove in and started executing on exactly the message that you had sent at our meeting. So it was a really spectacular program. What do you think, Jim?
Oh, well, like I said in the introduction, I already have 2 pages of notes from the first 2 times I got listen to David speak, and that was one of them. And it did incite a whole lot of awesome conversation, because there's so many KPIs that get tracked, and everyone was on their chair going, well, gee, which one's the right one? And it turned out to be something totally different. It was great.
It really was. So why don't you get us started on our topic this month, Jim, and let's engage David in the process now.
Love to. All of us are in a similar space when it comes to helping organizations. So, David, the first question is, and unfortunately, it's a fairly common one, but why do so many people struggle as frontline sales managers when they move into this role?
Yeah, it is a common one. I struggled when I became a sales manager, and I think my experience is pretty typical. So, you're a salesperson, you're an individual contributor, you are successful at that. And some of those people get promoted into sales management, and it's exciting. It's like, wow, I got a promotion, and maybe you have a new business card. I did. I don't know if people still get business cards now, but what you don't get is much training, sometimes no training. And it's really hard to succeed in a new role that's very different when you really don't understand what that difference is. So the difference between I need to serve my prospects and customers and hit a number is very different from I need to help other people do that same thing. And I think that seemingly subtle difference is actually huge. And it's one of the main reasons that I see new sales managers struggling. They don't bridge that gap, and organizations don't help them bridge that gap.
Yeah, I bet oftentimes, David, you see new managers trying to do it for their reps as opposed to serving them and helping them move forward. I mean, that would be my first, I remember my first couple of sales leadership roles where, I just wanted to go do it for them, versus sitting back and having them develop. And it took me a while to, sort of figure that out.
Yeah, I think salespeople are very kind of action oriented, right? Like, I need to execute, and that's excellent. It's awesome. It's a fantastic instinct, but you have to recalibrate when you're a manager. And if you're a parent or if you're a sports coach, you can really understand the analogy. You can't go do it for somebody else unless that's what you want your job to be. Your job as a manager is to help other people succeed, and doing it for them isn't going to get them there. One of the other things that you typically see is instead of coaching, and we might talk about that a little bit today if the conversation goes that route, but instead of what you might consider coaching, what you see a lot of is, well, here's what I would do. And here's what I would do doesn't always fit, because different salespeople have different personalities and styles and approaches. So I think these are the first two kind of knee-jerk reactions, do it for them, or here's what I would do. And it makes sense, but it's not really as effective as some more mature, refined, robust approaches to sales management that some people do evolve to over time.
David, I said something awesome there that I'm going to circle back to in just a second, but another covert way that people say, this is what I would do, is, have you thought of this? Which is just another way to say the exact same thing, right? This is what I'm thinking, and I really prefer you try this one. As salespeople, we kind of get that people are different because we have to be able to sell, if you will, to multiple personalities, multiple communication styles. Yet when we're managing, we seem to forget the fact that we're not all the same salespeople either, right? We're all different, just like you just stated.
Absolutely.
David, why is this phenomenon so common? What is the common characteristics that really, underpin this whole notion of the challenge of being a great sales leader?
I don't know. I've spent a lot of time thinking about it, and I have an answer that kind of feels comfortable to myself. I don't know, because it makes no sense to me. We're talking about salespeople and frontline sales management. This is the arm of a company that is reaching out to potential new people that might offer money for what the company does. Like, how can you not pay more attention to that? But I think one of the really subtle things that underpins this problem is there are some people who are effective at selling, but there are very few people who are effective at understanding how to help other people sell. And this generates a couple of different problems. One we've already touched on. When senior management needs to decide who's going to be the new frontline sales manager, if you don't really understand what it takes to be effective in that role as a senior manager, the default is, well, I should just pick the person who does the job the best. And if I pick the person who does the job the best, they must know what other people should be doing. And, I hate to be so cliche that I go back to sports analogies, but if you think of your favorite sports player, Michael Jordan, LeBron James, or, whoever it might happen to be, you might learn a lot from them, but if their approach is, this is what I would do or do this, you're just not going to. So the skills that it takes to be effective as a frontline sales manager are different and not necessarily recognized, not only by new frontline sales managers, but also the people who are putting them into those roles. And I think that's one of the big drivers of why this is so common, is what it takes to be effective in that role is understood at a very superficial level.
That is so interesting that you talked about the sales manager's manager, particularly in mid-sized organizations or larger organizations. I'm not necessarily talking about an entrepreneurial, because that's a whole nother topic we could probably get into. But in the mid-sized companies, oftentimes those leaders that are the bosses of the different sales managers are usually operationally focused and aren't necessarily salespeople themselves, or they come out of some other background, finance or some other place. And so I thought that was an interesting comment you made, because if they don't understand what it takes, then they also default. And that's just creating layers of issues that, sometimes they pick right and people turn out okay, but probably I've seen often than not, you have weak leadership.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that's usually the case, and since we're talking about sales managers struggling, David, what do you think are some of the core needs, core skills that these managers need but don't have?
Yep. It starts with the perspective that we've already touched on, right? You have to start by recognizing it's different to be an individual contributor than it is to help other individual contributors succeed. From there, I think you immediately go to, in my mind, you go to coaching, right? How am I going to help individuals, and how am I going to help my team become better? The other thing that I think is really helpful is having a process orientation. And I know a lot of salespeople have, and a lot of sales managers have, a negative connotation of process. I'm kind of a process-oriented person myself. And when I talk about it, I often get a lot of pushback, because I think people have had negative experiences with something that has been described to them as sales process. When I think of sales process, I really think about it as, what do I need to do to get from point A to point B? What are the steps that I need to take from I see a name on my screen or on a list to I'm, closing a piece of business with this person? And when you can break that down in a way that it's clear, your team kind of agrees on what the big pieces are. You don't have to, have people robotically mimicking some little, script. Every move shouldn't be scripted. But if you have a framework that everybody agrees to, now you've got a structure within which you can coach and within which you can optimize at the individual and the team level. So learning how to be an effective coach and learning how to have a process orientation, I think, are two really effective things that help frontline sales managers succeed. And very often those who struggle don't seem to have a firm grasp on those perspectives.
Love that answer, especially around process. I happen to be an engineer by degree, so I'm a process-oriented kind of guy. I have had a couple clients over the years kind of complain about the process conversation, but if you're going to have an organization that can scale repeatedly and predictably, you need a foundation. What's the foundation? A process. That's what we repeat, right? So, I mean, like you said, to why does this happen? You're like, I don't know, because it doesn't make any sense to me. I have the same response to why is it so complicated to have a process conversation? Makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, it seems like
I think.
Go ahead, David. Go ahead.
Oh, thanks. We talked about this a little bit in the cohort that we did last month. I think a lot of sales organizations think about process in terms of what they see on their CRM or, whatever similar tool they're using to track. And most CRMs will come with a pretty straightforward Kanban board, right? It's columns. Each column has a header. somebody's a lead, and then they're a prospect, and then they're qualified, and then we do a demo, whatever, like the labels don't matter, but it's this kind of one-dimensional process. It's labels, and somebody is in column A or column B or column C. And there isn't really agreement more deeply about what has to happen in column 1 before we move to column 2, and what has to happen in column 2 before we move to column 3, and how do we do those things effectively. And when you have that mapped out, you just have so much more you can work with and agree on. And this was really the basis of the conversation that we had last month. And I just don't see most organizations really thinking about process beyond that first level. And as such, there's just a lot of confusion because people are doing things differently within that first level. One person will be very thorough before they take a lead and call them a prospect. One person will send out 5 emails, don't get a response, and check the box. And when you have this kind of inconsistency within your organization, process doesn't serve you. So it's pretty natural to have a negative reaction to it.
Yeah, I often see leadership sees process as an accountability tool, and salespeople see process as over scripting and not able to be myself and not able to do the things that I do. It's almost like micromanagement, and I'm saying it's neither one, but people have this sort of preconceived bias that that's what it's about, when really what I hear you're saying is, if you have a framework, you can agree on all the stages of the framework, then you have a real reason I can coach you individually about how you can be more effective in that process, in that framework.
Yeah, and when Jim asks, what can sales managers do to be more effective? I think when you start thinking about process that way, not only is that effective from the process perspective, but I think one of the things that a lot of sales people really resent about their managers is they don't feel like what the manager is doing is supporting their efforts to be effective. So you used a great word, accountability, right? It's the most powerful word in sales management, but it's often misconstrued or misused or construed properly because it's used as a blunt instrument to bludgeon people into compliance. Accountability should really just be like, we agreed that this is what we would do. Let's talk about how that got done. And most people are kind of focused on the second part when they think about accountability. Oh, I'm in trouble. I'm being held accountable to something. It's really the first part that's important. Let's be clear and let's agree about what the expectations are. And I think when most people have clear expectations, maybe they'll push back on them, but there's something substantial to push back, or you can reach agreement about expectations and then move forward. But without that agreement, accountability is it's a punishment.
That leads me to the next question, David. What are some of the key management activities that frontline sales managers should be doing, but don't do it?
Yeah, I don't want to repeat myself, but I got to come back to one-on-one coaching. One-on-one coaching is probably the most powerful thing that a sales manager can do if they're doing it properly. I love these surveys that you see because they reflect what I see as well. The vast majority of frontline sales managers will tell you that they coach, and the vast majority of people who report to them will tell you that they don't. So, we can talk about coaching till we're blue in the face, but, I think we need to have another conversation called, well, what is that? And what does it really look like? And what is it that some of these folks are doing that they think is coaching that's really, just kind of like pointing at a spreadsheet and letting people know they didn't hit a particular number?
David, before we go to break for our pro commercial, let's dive into that for a second, because I don't want to. I know we could spend a whole topic on it, but just in a minute or so, describe for our audience what you think good coaching looks like. What does good coaching look like? Because your statistics are spot on, and me and Jim see this every day when we go into companies to try to help.
I think the best way to think about coaching, I learned this from a friend of mine who's a life coach, and the best way to think about coaching is that you want to presume that the other person has the answers, and your job is to help them find them. And when you bring your own subject matter expertise, and when you bring patience, and when you bring listening, and when you have a clear direction that you want things to go, but you're helping this person find their own answers. Not only is it going to be more pleasant, but it's going to be more effective. And we know this as salespeople, because as salespeople, we know that we could go into our clients and our prospects and say, man, the stuff I'm selling to you today is so awesome. But it's going to be a whole lot less effective than if we engineer a conversation in which we help them come up with that conclusion by themselves. And we have to do the same thing as coaches if we want to be effective. That's how I like to think about it.
Well, I always like to also consider coaching being intentional and planned, and not that ad hoc, you're in the heat of the moment, because I think coaching is a skill transfer, right? It's people realizing their skill set and practicing their skill set. And you don't do that in the heat of the moment. Doesn't mean you don't put your coaching hat on in certain situations, but I've always found that companies that have great coaching with a great coaching culture is a very intentional process. It's not something that's very ad hoc.
Something that I like that David said there about helping them find the answer is they're doing the work, right? It eliminates the here's what I'd like you to do comment, right? Or here's what I'm thinking comment. It's what do you think you should do? And then you get to be the guide rails for that decision to make sure they don't fall off the cliff, but they're ultimately doing the work, which is awesome.
Well, this is
because they'll walk away with buy-in, right?
Exactly. It's their idea.
Well, we have so much more to discuss in this segment. So let's take a minute for our sponsor to give them a chance to run their little spot for us, and we'll come back and continue this conversation, David.
Are you a self-taught salesperson? Over half of organizations say they take a random or informal approach to sales training, if there's any training at all. Beyond that, sales leaders are feeling overwhelmed with the challenges of trying to provide the support their team needs. What if there was a plan in place that provided the necessary tools to train and coach your sales organization and gave you strategic and predictable growth for the company? When you and I partner together, we focus on those challenges. We will learn and improve communication skills. And when it comes to communication, I'm going to share a secret that will set your team above your competitors. Together, we will develop and execute a repeatable, scalable sales process. Your team of sales professionals will move the needle on tasks more efficiently and more frequently, and that leads to greater sales and bigger profits. I also have a plan for the sales leader. If you were a top performer and decided to take that leap into management, you may have been shocked to find the needs are different on that side of the team. Building the important internal relationships, driving company culture, and creating efficient and effective sales meetings are a few of the strengths we will focus on. If you're sick of monotonous meetings and meetings to schedule the next meeting, let me show you how to create a team of sales professionals that will dominate your industry. I'm looking forward to meeting with you and learning about your organization. Let's determine together if a partnership makes sense or not. I fully engage with my partners, so I can only work with a select few at a time. Send me an email or connect with me on LinkedIn. See you soon.
Well, Jim, that was sort of timely. Thank you, Jim, and for Focal Point being our sponsor this month. But this was planned some time ago, so it couldn't have
really
been
coincidental.
a better situation for what our discussion's about today.
So, David, the next thing that's interesting, we're talking about some of these challenges are, what do you think gets in the way? So what are some things that are keeping the sales managers from improving on their own skills or getting to these activities we were just talking about?
Yep. I think it really comes down to time and priorities. One of the things that I consistently see new frontline sales managers struggling with is they all of a sudden lose a whole lot of control over their calendar. Salespeople often are very busy people, but often they get to decide, I'm going to do this. I'm going to focus on that. I'm going to prospect now. I'm going to, write a proposal now. I'm going to, prioritize this. I'm going to reprioritize that. Many sales professionals, especially in B2B, and especially once they've have at least some complexity in their sales that they have control over, they have a lot more control over their time, even though they might not feel that way. When you become a frontline sales manager, all of a sudden you have got all kinds of people yanking on your chains. Not only are you probably responsible for selling, most sales managers are doing, direct sales themselves. They're also responsible for helping their team with their sales, not to mention managing the CRM and going to the meetings and doing the special project. And, there's so many things. So taking control of your time is very challenging. And the other is priorities. And this also comes back to senior leadership. Often there's a philosophy that, oh yeah, we want our team to succeed and we want the manager to help them succeed. But the priorities that are given to the frontline sales manager are often in conflict with that. I need you to take care of this. Jim in finance. Sorry, Jim, I didn't mean to. Bob in finance. Jim, the engineer, no, never mind.
There you go.
Bob in finance needs this particular metric that isn't coming out of the CRM. Can you help him figure out how to get that? So there's all kinds of stuff that's just raining down upon these poor frontline sales managers, and learning how to balance it all is often a huge challenge that some actually never overcome and can create massive burnout.
In my career, I've definitely experienced both, ones that I would say were really good and some that I would say were really bad. But you mentioned something there about going to all the meetings that triggered something for me. Right as I was going into my first sales role, a former salesman who is now in a manager role, happened to not be a sales manager role, but he said, you're about to step into the best role in the company. And after I left that role and became a leader, I realized exactly what he was telling me, because then I had to become a politician and deal with the people at the top and try to motivate the sales team. And a great sales leader is not only a great coach, but also an awesome buffer from the people at the top.
Yep. Amen. Absolutely.
You said something very early in that conversation, David, about sales managers having to sell and balance. I want to get your opinion, because I know me and Jim have had late nights discussing this one, but should a sales manager sell?
Yeah, it's a loaded question, isn't it? I ask that question a lot, and I find the answer to that question falls out pretty predictably. If you are a salesperson or a sales manager, it's usually a resounding yes. If you are a coach, consultant, trainer, the answer is often no. The yes perspective is certainly valid. The sales manager should sell because they need the credibility with the team. They won't have credibility if they can't demonstrate that they can do the job. They should be able to, or they should have the opportunity to really see what's happening in the field. So they're getting firsthand feedback from customers and prospects about the same things that their salespeople are doing. So there's a lot of good reasons, and also keeping your saw sharp and all that other good stuff. I think there's a lot of good reasons for that. The reason that I think a lot of coaches, consultants, and trainers believe that there's validity in the idea that they don't sell is because they believe in the concept that a good sales manager can have a multiplier effect. And this comes back to the earlier comment that I made about not knowing how to make other people effective. If you don't know how to make other people effective, what else should the manager be doing, right? But if a sales manager really does know how to make other people effective, imagine the impact that person could have if they were spending their time elevating the game of the individuals on their team, or recognizing some people shouldn't be there and accelerating that process, making sure that you're bringing in stronger talent, making sure that systems and processes are optimized so that the salespeople are as effective as possible, handling things in those meetings with the other departments, finance and operations and shipping and all these other departments that are touching the sales role, making sure that what happens in those meetings is really going to help their salespeople be more effective. And you can imagine if you've got a team of 5 or 10 people, and if you don't sell, you could probably have a larger team, and you were able to increase everybody's effectiveness by 10, 20, 30, 40, 50%, or the team's effectiveness by that amount. There's a really strong argument for, yeah, they shouldn't be selling. They should be making sure that the machine is running effectively. But when how to make the machine run effectively isn't well understood, it's pretty hard for people to buy into that perspective.
It makes a lot of sense. So I'm curious then, kind of off the top of your head, what would you say, assuming they're both equally important roles, selling to lead from the front, if you will, for the sales team, and then being that great sales manager, which is a 360 role inside the organization, what do you think a good balance is?
Yeah, that's a super tough question. I think it really depends on the organization. It depends on, the length of the sales cycle, the complexity of the sales cycle. I wouldn't dare to put out kind of a simple answer to that
Sure.
question. I'm a consultant, so it depends, right? But
Yeah.
I think it really does. If something's got a 6-month sales cycle, that's going to look a whole lot different than if something has a 2-week or a 3-week or a 4-week sales cycle. If there's 1 or 2 people involved in the decision as opposed to a dozen, if it's a 6-figure sale as opposed to a 4-figure sale. So I think there's a whole lot to balance out. And it also really, it's important to look at the culture of the company. Is there capacity, maybe not the culture, but just, is there capacity within leadership to allow that? If leadership is not going to accept that the sales manager should be spending their time not selling, they have to believe that that's productive activity. And until that perspective shifts, it's probably going to be mostly selling.
Okay. Well, so you mentioned leadership. So what can senior leadership do to help the frontline sales managers be more effective?
The first thing that has to happen, and I hate to keep coming back to this, I sound like a broken record, but it's so true. The first thing that has to happen is you have to recognize the difference in the roles, and you have to recognize the potential in the frontline sales manager role when it's done correctly. Until that happens, there's no discussion that's going to be had. And quite frankly, I've had that not discussion. As I progressed in my career, I became more choosy about the clients that I work with. And when I feel there's a huge resistance to letting the sales manager help the sales team, and as goofy as that sounds, but early in my career, for example, I would conduct sales trainings, and the sales manager didn't even show up to the meeting before the sales meeting to talk about what we were going to train on. And later in my career, I began to recognize that as a red flag. It's like, wow. So if the idea is let's just send our salespeople to a training and hope they learn something and come back and hope they use it, that's pretty hard to work with.
Yeah. Wow.
It's funny. I have to come back to something about should sales managers sell, and I admit I'm biased. I believe in that multiplier effect, really do. Certainly, you gave a lot of parameters and qualifications for the "it depends" answer, but I really lean the other way, and I'll tell you why. And it's because I've worked with a lot of companies that are scaling up, and a manager selling is not scalable, and so it gets in the way. And I think you can still sharpen your saw and get involved in sales because you're out in the field with your salespeople in front of customers, letting them do their thing and finding a way to play a role in that by letting the salesperson lead the process that turns into more. Certainly, if you got complex sales, you got multi-million-dollar sales that require a consensus to buy, that's where the leader can bridge some of that gap and step in. But certainly for entrepreneurial companies, there's that balance between I can't afford to do everything, so I got to sort of work my way into it. But maybe one final question for him, Jim, before we
can I just respond to that because philosophically, I am 1000% with you. but it is so rare to actually find that appetite in the field. The resistance to that is shocking. And boy, I'm all for changing that. But I think that's a real obstacle in our industry. Industry-wide, I think that perspective is an obstacle that we collectively could work to overcome. And, high praise for anyone who can make progress on that.
And that's why I raised it, because I think it's something I'm pretty passionate about. Jim, you want to get a closing question before we let David go today?
Absolutely. So with all of this excellent information that you, again, have so willingly provided, David, what is a piece of advice for either this person who's thinking about taking on a sales management role, or maybe they're newish and they're struggling like we've talked about? So how can we help them?
Yeah, as we've been saying throughout the episode today, start by recognizing that difference, the difference between being an individual contributor and, helping other people to succeed, and really take time to dig into what that really means. They're very, very different things. No judgment, not saying one's better, not saying one's worse, but recognize the difference. I know a lot of folks who are salespeople who have chosen just not to go into management because they really love selling. They don't need to be in a management role, and they're very happy there, and that's okay. But if you want to make that leap, you just got to go in with your eyes open. Now, if you're in that role now, and some of the things that we've talked about resonate, and you're thinking to yourself, wow, I need to find a way to rebalance, this is a conversation that you need to have with your boss. Take some time to prepare and really think about what's on your plate now and what you'd like to do and how you can present as a solution to a problem the changes that you'd like to see so that you can be more effective helping the team succeed in some of the ways that we've discussed today, and in some of the ways that you might have heard about in other places where you're looking at sales management and sales leadership issues.
Well, David, thank you so much for this very timely topic, and for your commitment to working with me and Jim, both on our cohort session and here on our TV and radio broadcast. Before we let you go today, can you tell us how people can find you if they want to learn more, want to engage with you in other ways? How can they connect with you?
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And thanks for the opportunity. Pretty much everything that I've built up and learned and understood in my 30-year sales and sales management and sales leadership career, I've baked into a program that I call the Sales Team Success System. So if you want to learn more about what I do and how I do it, salesteamsuccesssystem.com is a good place to go. Or you can just Google me or find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find.
Well, David, thank you so much again for being with us. And any parting comments, Jim, before we let David go?
No, I think everything's been said. It's just been wonderful. Like I said, this is actually my third opportunity to listen to David speak, and it's been spectacular each and every time. So again, David, thank you so much for all of your tidbits.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely.
Nice seeing you, David. We'll be in touch.
Take care.
Well, Jim, we're going to start promoting next month. We normally meet on the first Monday at 4 p.m. each month, but in the month of September, it is on Labor Day here in the U.S. So we're going to change our time to the Tuesday, September 5th at 4 o'clock for next month. And we have another fantastic speaker lined up, and we're going to be talking about stuff pre-funnel, more about prospecting and more about getting a lead generation and things of that nature. So I'm looking forward to next month's show.
Oh, absolutely. Every single organization that I'm aware of that sells things, which is probably all of them, need qualified leads. So can't wait. Excellent.
Well, Jim, it's always a pleasure. I look so forward to working with you again throughout the month. And, we have our cohort session will come up on I think it's the 23rd or 26th of August. So we'll see you then. And until then, have a great month, my friend.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you for joining us today. You are now eligible to attend the peer-to-peer professional development network of the Sales Leader Roundtable. It is held on the fourth Wednesday of each month at 12 o'clock noon Eastern Standard Time. For an invitation, email us at info@salesleaderroundtable.com or visit us at www.salesleaderroundtable.com. Our next show is scheduled for the first Monday of each month. We hope you will join us again.